I did not raise my voice. I did not slam the door. I stood there in the hallway with rain still dripping off my coat, and I watched my son-in-law wipe his shoes on my wife's good church dress while she knelt on the floor of the mudroom, and something in me went very calm and very cold. Before I go on, tell me where you're watching from tonight, family. My name is Marcus Whitfield. To my daughter and the man she married, I am just an old man who used to fix engines for a living, a grease-stained grandfather with a bad knee, and a habit of falling asleep in front of the television. That's what they see. They don't see the rest of it, because I never let them see the rest of it. 41 years ago, I opened a two-bay auto shop in a cinder-block building off Route 9, outside Charlotte, North Carolina, with a loan I almost didn't get because the bank manager looked at a young black man in coveralls and decided I wasn't worth the risk. I proved him wrong. Then I proved every other man like him wrong, one transmission at a time, one contract at a time, until that two-bay shop became a regional fleet maintenance company, and that company became a holding company, and that holding company owns 40% of the commercial truck depots between Atlanta and Richmond. My wife, Odessa, is the only person alive who knows the real number sitting in our accounts. She doesn't care about the number. She cares about her rose garden and her Sunday choir and her grandbabies. She has never once asked me for anything I didn't already want to give her. And in 43 years of marriage, she has never raised her voice at me. Not once. Not even the night I told her the bank was about to take the shop and we might lose the house. When our daughter Renee brought home a man named Terrence, I watched him shake my hand a half-second too long, like he was measuring me. He had a nice smile and an expensive watch he'd bought on credit, and he talked about vision and legacy, the way young men talk when they've never built anything with their own two hands. Odessa liked him well enough. I kept my opinions to myself because that's what a father does when his daughter is 30 years old and in love. We help them the way we help family. I bought the house in Ballantyne through a private trust so nobody would ever know it was mine on paper. I've learned that people treat you different when they know you're the one holding the deed. I paid for the renovations. I made a call to an old client and got Terrence his position as VP of Operations at a logistics firm, though to this day he believes he earned that seat on merit alone. All we asked in return was simple. Let us stay in the little carriage house out back when we visit. And while I was traveling for the depot expansion, look after Odessa, because she'd just had knee surgery and needed help getting around. I trusted my daughter with the one thing in this world I could never replace. I was gone 11 weeks, handling a merger with a fuel distribution partner in Houston, the kind of deal that needed my eyes on every page. Odessa and I talked on the phone most nights, but the calls got shorter as the weeks went on, and her voice got quieter, and I told myself it was just tiredness from the physical therapy. I told myself a lot of things I shouldn't have told myself. I flew back 2 weeks earlier than planned because I missed my wife, and I wanted to surprise her. I wanted to see her face when I walked through that door without warning. It was a Thursday evening in late October, the kind of cold rain that gets into your bones no matter how good your coat is. I had the car service drop me a block early so I could walk up and see the house lit up, the way I used to when I was younger. And the shop was new, and every light on in a building felt like a small miracle I'd built with my own hands. The house was lit up, all right. Cars lined the circular drive, a couple of Range Rovers, a Mercedes. One car I recognized as belonging to Terrence's boss. There was a party happening, and nobody had told me about it. I stood at the edge of the driveway with my duffel bag and my cane, and something in my gut, the same something that had kept me alive in some rough rooms over the years, told me to walk quiet. I came around by the side entrance, near the mudroom door, the one Odessa always used because it was closer to her garden, and that's where I found her. She was on her knees on the cold tile, scrubbing at a stain on the floor with a rag, wearing an old gray housecoat I didn't recognize, something worn thin at the elbows. Her silver hair, which she always kept done up nice for church, was pulled back in a messy knot, damp with sweat despite the cold. She looked thinner than when I'd left, much thinner. My chest went tight in a way I hadn't felt since the doctors told us about her first surgery. The door from the kitchen swung open, and Terrence stepped into the mudroom in a tailored charcoal suit, a glass of dark liquor in his hand, laughing at something over his shoulder before he turned and saw Odessa on the floor. He didn't look surprised. He looked annoyed. The way you look at a stain that keeps coming back no matter how many times you clean it. "You missed a spot," he said. Then he looked down at his shoes, saw a smear of mud on the toe from the wet driveway, and before I understood what was happening, he lifted his foot and wiped it clean across the shoulder of her housecoat. Right there, like she was a mat by the door. "Terrence, please." I heard her whisper, and her voice was so small, so unlike the woman who used to run the church fundraiser like a drill sergeant, that I almost didn't recognize it either. He turned back toward the kitchen doorway, where two men in suits stood watching with the kind of polite discomfort rich men wear when they're deciding whether something is their business. "Sorry about that, gentlemen," Terrence said, flashing that expensive smile. "That's just Odessa, Renee's mother. She likes to help out around here, keeps her busy. You know how the elderly get when they feel useless." One of the men gave an uncomfortable little laugh. "A bit much for a house guest," he said. "You have no idea," Terrence answered, swirling his glass. That was the moment the man I used to be. The patient one. The one who'd spent 4 decades letting fools underestimate him, because it was good for business, quietly died in that doorway. What replaced him was older than patience, and a great deal more dangerous. "That's enough," I said. My voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It cut through that kitchen like a torque wrench dropped on concrete. Terrence spun around, liquor sloshing over his knuckles. His eyes narrowed when he saw me standing there in my wet coat with my duffel bag, an old man dripping rainwater onto his imported tile. "Marcus," he said, and there wasn't a shred of respect in how he said my name. "Didn't know you were back early. You could have called." "I could have," I said. "Instead, I get to see exactly how you treat my wife when you think nobody with any say in the matter is watching." He recovered fast, the way men like him always do, sliding right back into that oily charm. "Gentlemen, this is my father-in-law," he said to the two men in the doorway, and he said it the way you'd introduce a leak in the basement. "Old school guy. Used to turn wrenches for a living. Don't mind him." One of the men actually smirked. I didn't look at them. I knelt down next to Odessa, my bad knee screaming at me the whole way, and I put my hand under her arm. "B," I said, the old nickname from when we were young and broke, and she used to call herself my best investment. "It's me. It's Marcus." She flinched away from my hand at first, and her eyes had a glassy, faraway look that scared me worse than anything Terrence had done. "I didn't mean to break it," she murmured, not really looking at me. "I'll clean it up. Please, don't put me back downstairs." Downstairs. My stomach dropped through the floor. There was no downstairs in that house that made any sense for my wife to be talking about, unless somebody had put her there. Terrence straightened his cuffs like he was bored. "She gets confused," he said. "Renee and I have been so patient with her, but honestly, Marcus, at some point, you have to consider a facility. We can't keep managing this around a business dinner." "You mean around your investors?" I said. He shrugged, not even bothering to deny it. Same difference. I helped Odessa to her feet. She weighed almost nothing in my arms, and I felt something ignite in my chest that I hadn't felt in 30 years. Not since the week the bank almost took everything, and I drove 18 hours straight to close a deal that saved us. I looked at Terrence one more time. I wanted to remember his face exactly as it was in that moment. Smug, comfortable, certain that nothing in his life would ever come due. "We'll be going," I said. "Good," Terrence said, relief plain on his face. "The guest house is around back, same as always." "We're not going to the guest house," I said. I didn't explain further. I walked my wife past the two investors, past the marble island stocked with hors d'oeuvres. I'd probably paid for indirectly, out through the front door and into the rain, and I called for a car. In the back seat, with the heat blasting and Odessa shivering against my shoulder, she came back to herself in pieces. "Marcus," she whispered, gripping my hand so tight her knuckles went pale. "Is that really you?" "It's me, baby. I'm here. They've been giving me pills," she said, so quiet I almost missed it under the sound of the wipers. "Terrence says it's for my nerves. I don't feel like myself. I feel like I'm underwater all the time." I held her hand tighter and said nothing, because if I'd opened my mouth right then, what came out wouldn't have been fit for her to hear. We checked into a suite at the Ritz downtown. The staff knew me not from Flash, but from 20 years of quiet, generous patronage, the kind that doesn't need announcing. Nobody blinked at my soaked flannel or my wife's condition. I ran a hot bath. I ordered soup and warm bread. And when I helped Odessa out of that thin housecoat, I saw the bruises on her upper arms, 4 faint fingerprint marks, yellowing at the edges like they'd been there a couple of weeks. I saw how her wrists looked, thinner than they should have been. I sat in the armchair after she fell asleep, and I did not move for 3 hours. At 2 a.m. I called Harold Greaves, my attorney of almost 30 years, a man who had gotten me out of more trouble than I cared to admit and who owed me exactly 0 favors because I'd always paid him fairly and on time. "Harold," I said when he picked up groggy, "I need you awake and I need you now." I told him everything. The mudroom, the shoes, the pills, the bruises, the word downstairs. There was a long silence on his end. "Marcus," he finally said, "if even half of what you're describing is provable, we're not talking about a family disagreement anymore. We're talking about elder abuse and possibly worse. I want a doctor to see her tonight, before anything gets explained away or cleaned up." "Already ahead of you," I said, and I called Doctor Alicia Boone, a physician I trusted, who came to the hotel at 3 in the morning without a single question about why. What Dr. Boone found built the floor out from under me all over again. Odessa was malnourished, nearly 15 pounds lighter than her last checkup. Her blood work showed the presence of a strong sedative, the kind prescribed for severe anxiety, at a dosage far higher than anything a doctor would responsibly prescribe to a 70-year-old woman recovering from hip surgery. "Somebody has been keeping her tranquilized," Dr. Boone said quietly, and I watched her choose each word like she was diffusing something. "This isn't an accident. This is sustained." My phone rang before sunrise. "Renee." I almost didn't answer. I did because some fool part of me still hoped she'd surprise me. "Daddy, you have to bring Mama back," she said, breathless, panicked. "Terrence is furious. He's saying you kidnapped her. Please, you're going to ruin everything." "I didn't kidnap your mother," I said, my voice flat and even. "I rescued her. She's been drugged, Renee. She's 15 pounds underweight. There are bruises on her arms." Silence. Then, "She's been difficult, Daddy. She wanders at night. She broke some things." Terrence said the medication was standard, just to help her stay calm. "Standard," I repeated. "Bruises are standard now? Starving a grown woman is standard?" I waited for her to say she didn't know. I waited for her to break down and tell me she'd been blind to it. Instead, she said, "He's under so much pressure, Daddy. The promotion, the new investors, he needs the house to run a certain way. And Mama being confused all the time it was hard on him." "And you," I said, "you watched him wipe his shoes on her back like she was a mat by the door." Silence stretched long enough that I heard Terrence's voice somewhere behind her, sharp and demanding. "I have to go," Renee whispered. "Please, Daddy, just bring her back before he loses the deal." "If he loses it because of this, he'll take it out on me." "Take it out on you how?" I asked, and my own voice sounded like a stranger's to me. She didn't answer that. "Vanessa," I stopped myself, shook my head, tried again. "Renee, do not call me Daddy again until you can explain to me why you let a man put his hands on your mother." I ended the call before she could answer. The quiet after that was the loudest thing I've ever heard in my life. I want to tell you, whoever's listening tonight, whatever family you've got left, hold on to them the right way, because sometimes the people who share your blood are the first ones to let you down, and it will hurt worse than any stranger ever could. Harold met me at his office on the 31st floor of a building overlooking the Charlotte skyline at 4 in the morning. Papers already spread across his desk like a man laying out evidence at a crime scene, because that is exactly what he was doing. "You wanted to know how deep it goes," he said. "I need coffee to tell you the rest." We had set up a family trust years earlier for Renee and Terrence, meant to cover the Ballantine property taxes, upkeep, and a modest living stipend, along with an emergency medical fund of $400,000 reserved strictly for catastrophic health needs. Harold slid a printout across the desk. 6 weeks earlier, a withdrawal for $180,000 from that medical fund, the stated reason listed as emergency surgical procedure Odessa Whitfield. Odessa hadn't had any surgery in 6 weeks. She'd had one surgery, months back, that I paid for personally, in full, before I ever left for Houston. I looked at the signature, authorizing the withdrawal. It was close to hers, not close enough. The loops were wrong, the pressure too heavy in places where Odessa's hand, arthritic and gentle, would have been light. He forged her signature, I said, to steal from his own mother-in-law's medical fund. Harold nodded grimly and turned the page. The money hadn't gone to any hospital. It had gone, in 2 separate transfers, to a boat dealership in Wilmington and a jeweler in South Park Mall. "There's more," Harold said, and this was the part that put ice water straight into my veins. 3 months prior, Terrence had used the Ballantyne house, the one that was legally mine through the trust, as collateral for a business loan of $2.3 million, claiming full ownership on the loan application, a felony on its own. If that loan defaulted, the bank could come after everything in the trust, everything meant to protect my daughter, all because Terrence had gambled it on an expansion for his little side venture nobody had bothered to mention to me. "He's been robbing you blind while starving your wife, to keep her quiet enough not to notice," Harold said. "The question, Marcus, is what you want to do about it." I sat there a long moment with my hands folded, thinking about 41 years of grease under my fingernails, about the bank manager who didn't think I deserved a loan, about every man who ever looked at me and saw less than what I was. "I want to take everything," I said finally. "Not out of anger, out of arithmetic. I want him to end up exactly where he put my wife, on the floor, scrubbing at something, wondering how he got there." "Then we do it clean," Harold said. "Documented. Legal. Airtight. No revenge, Marcus. Justice. It moves slower, but it doesn't come apart in court the way revenge does." Over the following 6 weeks, while Odessa recovered in the quiet of our lake house up near Lake Norman, gaining back her color and her laugh, and slowly, her trust in her own memory, Harold and a forensic accountant built a case that closed every door Terrence might have run through. Bank records. The forged signature, confirmed by 3 independent handwriting experts. Security footage from a camera I'd had installed in the mudroom 2 years back after a break-in scare. Footage that had been quietly backing up to a cloud server Terrence never knew existed. Footage showing him doing to Odessa exactly what I'd seen with my own eyes, and worse, on other nights, when I wasn't there to catch it. Medical records showing the sedative levels climbing steadily for 4 months. And underneath it all, the forged loan application, the fraudulent withdrawal, the boat, the jewelry. The morning Harold's team filed everything with the district attorney's office and simultaneously called the loan due in full. I was sitting on the back porch of the lake house with Odessa, watching her work a needle through a quilt square, humming something from church. They arrested Terrence at his office in front of the very investors he'd been so desperate to impress. Renee called me 11 times that day. I let every single one go to voicemail. The trial took 4 months. Harold's case was airtight enough, as he put it, to embarrass a law school. Terrence's attorney tried an insanity angle, then tried to argue duress, then, when neither worked, tried to pin the whole scheme on Renee, calling her the true architect of the fraud, while he was simply a devoted husband trying to keep the family solvent. It was pathetic to watch a man that's certain of his own charm discover, in real time, that a judge had absolutely no use for it. She sentenced him to 12 years on the fraud and forgery counts, to run consecutive with 4 more for elder abuse and endangerment, 16 years total. He'll be nearly 60 when he walks out, no money, no career, a felony record that follows him into every room he ever tries to enter again. Because I still held the note on the loan he'd used the house to secure, I had every legal right to liquidate what remained of his assets down to the last dollar. The boat, gone. The jewelry, sold at auction. His accounts, seized to satisfy the judgment. He walked into that federal facility with nothing in his commissary account, and, from what Harold hears through channels, spends most of his time in the law library drafting appeals nobody reads, telling other inmates he was framed by a black billionaire with a grudge, and getting laughed out of the room for it, because, in there, his tailored suits and his oily charm buy him exactly nothing. Renee's case was different. The prosecutors decided her role, while morally indefensible, was one of willful blindness rather than active fraud. She hadn't signed anything, hadn't authorized the withdrawals, had simply chosen comfort over her own mother's safety for months on end. She avoided prison. She did not avoid consequences. With the trust frozen and Terrence's assets seized, the credit cards stopped, the car got repossessed, and the Ballantine house, which had always been mine, went back to me the moment the loan was settled. Renee moved into a one-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of the city and took a job at a pharmacy counter to make rent. I went to see her once, about 4 months after sentencing. I didn't go inside. I sat in my car across the street and watched through the pharmacy's front window. She was behind the counter in a smock, 2 sizes too big. Her hair, once professionally styled every 2 weeks, pulled back in a plain elastic band, gray showing at the roots she used to have colored religiously. A customer, an older man with a booming voice, was upset about an insurance rejection on his prescription, and I watched him lean over the counter and call her incompetent, watched my daughter's shoulders curl inward, watched her mumble an apology and reach for a rag to wipe up a spilled bottle of pills that had rolled off the counter in the commotion. She got down on one knee to gather them off the tile floor, apologizing the whole time. Her head bowed the exact same way her mother's had been bowed in that mudroom 8 months earlier. She looked up. Through the glass, for 1 second, our eyes met. I watched recognition hit her face. Then shame flood right behind it, turning her cheeks red. Her hand rose slightly off the counter, a small, involuntary reach. I could almost hear her mouth the word, "Daddy." I didn't move. I didn't nod. I didn't roll down the window. I looked at her the way you look at weather you can't do anything about, and then I told my driver to go. I didn't hate her in that moment. Hatred takes fuel, and I didn't have any left to spend on her. What I felt was something quieter and colder, a kind of grief for the daughter I thought I'd raised, sitting right alongside the reality of the one I actually had. She writes sometimes. Harold forwards the letters to a drawer in my desk. I don't open anymore. I know what they say without reading them. They're apologies wrapped around requests. I'm done being a bank for people who only remember I'm their father when the money runs out. These days, Odessa and I split our time between the lake house and a little place near the coast in South Carolina, close enough to hear the water at night. She's back to her rose garden, back to leading the alto section on Sunday, back to calling herself my best investment, and every time she says it, I remember exactly how close I came to losing her to people who were supposed to protect her. I think about Terrence sometimes, not with rage anymore. More like you'd think about a bad storm that's already passed through and done its damage and moved on. He looked at an old black man in a worn flannel jacket and decided that meant powerless. He never once considered that the man who built the roof over his head from nothing could just as easily take it back out from under him. That's the mistake fools like him always make. They confuse quiet for weak. They confuse patience for permission. There's a lesson in all this, family. One that cost me almost everything to learn all over again at my age. A fine suit doesn't make a man decent. A title on a business card doesn't make him a leader. And money in the bank has never once made anybody worthy of respect. Real power isn't about how loud you can get or how many people flinch when you walk into a room. Real power is what you do with your strength, when nobody with any say in the matter is watching. It's choosing, every single day, to protect the people you love instead of the reputation you've built. I made my peace with what happened to my daughter, but I did not make peace with what happened to my wife, and I never will, because that is where I draw the line. And I hope you draw that line somewhere too. If you've got an elder in your family that everybody stopped checking on because it's inconvenient, go check on them tonight. Don't wait until you're standing in a mudroom in the rain finding out the hard way. My name is Marcus Whitfield. I spent 41 years with grease under my fingernails, building something nobody thought a man like me could build, and I spent one rainy Thursday night reminding 2 people exactly what all of it was for. Thank you for sitting with me through this story tonight. If you believe family is supposed to protect each other and not tear each other apart, hit that like button and subscribe, and tell me down in the comments, would you have given Renee a second chance, or did she earn every bit of what she got? I'll see you in the next story. Grease under your nails never tells you what a man's worth is made of, and neither does a diploma or a fat paycheck. Odessa never asked Marcus for a number, only for his hand in the rain. That's the real inheritance showing up, checking on the ones who raised you, before the silence teaches you the hard way, what you had. Go call someone tonight who's been quiet lately. A small note for you. This story was written and imagined by AI purely for entertainment, though we hope its gentle life lesson still found its way to your heart.